Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Archaeology with Flint Dibble, and my name is Flint Dibble. I'm an archaeologist with over 25 years of experience. I've done surveys in the desert. I have done surveys in Greece. I've excavated at Pompeii in Italy and throughout the Mediterranean world, from Stone Age caves to medieval castles. So, I want to look today at this fun idea, this mysterious idea that is most famously associated with Graham Hancock.
We are looking at the faint fingerprints and traces of a lost civilization that explored and mapped the world more than 13,000 years ago.
They're telling us that this lost civilization was submerged in a great flood around 11,600 years before our time.
But most surveys show that about 50% of people believe in this idea of a lost civilization from the last ice age, right? And as somebody named Flint, who studies stone tools made out of flint, I'm familiar with ice age evidence. I'm familiar with evidence from advanced civilizations. And so I want to approach this from the point of view of an archaeologist. And in many ways, this idea that Hancock and others propose is very much a mysterious idea, this idea of the civilization that flourished, and at the end of the Ice Age, it was destroyed. It was a civilization that apparently spanned the entire globe across the earth. And it's this idea that has captivated people for a few hundred years, that there was this civilization, it was destroyed at the end of the Ice Age with the rising of the seas, a cataclysmic flood, and the survivors taught hunter-gatherers the fruits of civilization, how to grow crops, how to navigate the seas, how to build monuments, about astronomy and whatnot. And so when we think about this idea, one of the big questions is what kind of technology are we looking for? For example, Graham Hancock has famously suggested that this civilization from more than 12,000 years ago had technology equivalent to our own modern day from the 18th or even early 19th centuries. And so I want to think through how we can test all of these ideas. And I want to also point out that this is not a new idea. This idea of a pre-flood civilization has been around for hundreds of years. It was made famous in the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World in the late 19th century by Ignatius Donnelly. And even the ideas that we hear about today on Joe Rogan or Netflix about these ideas of a comet impact that caused the destruction of this civilization, that idea itself has been around since Ignatius Donnelly's time. For example, in this painting called Terror Antiquus, about the end of Atlantis, destroyed by an impact from outer space, as we can see. And this painting is from 1908, of course. So how can we go about testing this hypothesis? And I really do want to try to take this hypothesis seriously. 50% of people out there believe in it. And so I want to try to look at what our archaeological evidence, the hard evidence of stone tools, of artifacts, and of sites around the globe can actually say about this idea and how we can test it. And so I want to make this really clear. Archaeology is always updating with new evidence. We find new sites, new monuments, new artifacts every single year, and we develop new methods. And so archaeologists are always updating. A textbook from 50 years ago looks nothing like a textbook today. For example, now we understand that hunter-gatherers built extraordinarily phenomenal monuments around the world, from sort of these enclosures built out of mammoth bones and mammoth tusks to famous sites like Poverty Point in Louisiana, one of the largest mound sites in the world, built by hunter-gatherers, or Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And so this is kind of an important point I want to say. We also develop our hypotheses based off the known evidence that we have. So the reason why we say that Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers is because we have thousands of seeds and animal bones from the site that shows that these were plants and animals that were collected and gathered, not produced through farming, and hunted, not produced through pastoral herding. And so we know this from the evidence that we have, who these people were and how they subsisted. And so the reality is that whatever we find, we publish. And in many ways, what is archaeological consensus is about convincing our colleagues. Every paper that I publish in the journals of archaeological science or elsewhere, What they do is they present new ideas where I am trying to convince my colleagues. And in this sense, we need to be very skeptical of people that are out there trying to convince the public, because the public is not familiar with archaeological evidence. Scholars are, professionals are, experts are. We're the ones that are familiar. And so if you want to change consensus, you need to present things in a way that convinces the people who understand the archaeological evidence that exists. So when we think about how do we test a lost civilization from the Ice Age, archaeologists work from the known to the unknown. We always take what we know and then try to use that to extrapolate, well, what do we need to explore? What do we need to excavate? What do we need to survey to look at the unknown? And Graham Hancock is famous for not wanting to do this. He wants to jump into the unknown.
I find my evidence not by going from the known to the unknown, as Dibble describes archaeological methodology, but by abandoning all preconceived notions and diving straight into the unknown to see what I find. That there is no evidence of a lost Ice Age civilization in what archaeologists have studied.
And what he does by doing that is he gets you, the public, to ignore all the known evidence, the real hardcore facts, the artifacts and the structures that relate to his hypothesis, this lost civilization. So if we're looking for a lost civilization from the Ice Age, the first thing we should be looking for is what is the archaeology of the Ice Age. And Hancock never does that. He never once in any of his TV shows or books looks at these kinds of stone tools from the Ice Age. And this is a big problem because when we dive into the evidence from the Ice Age, we can see the state and quality of our evidence and what it shows and whether there's room for such a large global civilization. At the same time, Hancock suggests, well, there's all these unknown expanses in the world that archaeologists are not exploring. For example, with all the sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age, we need to be looking underwater because surely this global civilization lived along the coasts. And so I will be looking and diving in on the evidence we have underwater and on Ice Age coasts, so we can look at the evidence that is there from the Ice Age. Similarly, he loves to dive into the fact that we don't know much about the Sahara Desert or about the rainforest. And so let's look at what we do know, because that can inform us about what's possible in many ways. So first off, what Graham Hancock does do is he goes to sites that are definitely not Ice Age sites. For example, Gunung Padang in Indonesia, a site that's been intensively explored and excavated by archaeologists, including Dr. Lutfi Yondri from Indonesia, and his excavations have gone down and excavated below this monument. Here are a series of images that he has shared with me. You can see my interview with him on my YouTube channel. And in all these cases, he's excavated below the stone architecture. And from these areas below the stone architecture, he has found pottery, he has found stone tools, and he has found charcoal and bones that he has done radiocarbon dating on. And so in this sense, because he's excavated below this architecture, we know the dates of the architecture. It's not possible that the architecture could date before the material that is underneath it. And the radiocarbon dates that he has found and published in articles and in books show that Gunung Padang, this wonderful monument, this terraced hillside in Indonesia that is part of the first episode of Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse, it cannot be an Ice Age monument because the evidence clearly shows that the soils underneath it date to about 2100, 2200 years ago.
Gunung Padang is not a pyramid. Gunung Padang is a stone terrace. It's a specific culture in megalithic culture in the world. We know upright stone. We know about dormant, and Gunung Padang is stone terrace, not a pyramid. I have excavation and many books of excavation at Gunung Padang. I excavated a terrace wall. I try to find the old layer, the surface when Gunung Padang built in the past. I found a charcoal from terrace 1, terrace 2, terrace 3, 7. The charcoal have a context. The charcoal have a matrix. The charcoal have associations, also provenience and related with a Gunung Padang structure. The charcoal I send it to laboratory. I get the dating of Gunung Padang structure. The structure coming from 117 years before century until 45 before century. I find for three stone mortar. I found the same association, the same furniture as the symmetric with the charcoal.
So it is a monument that was constructed sometime after that date. It is not an Ice Age monument. Likewise, for example, Graham Hancock goes to the Serpent Mound. And again, he suggests, well, maybe this is from the Ice Age. But archaeologists have dug through the Serpent Mound and they have pulled out radiocarbon dates, and it dates conclusively to just from a couple thousand years ago. It does not date from 12,000 years ago. It's simply impossible. Likewise, in the second season of Ancient Apocalypse, Graham Hancock goes to Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island, and he looks at these wonderful, magnificent moai. But what he gets you to ignore is that archaeologists, again, have excavated underneath them and underneath the platforms and the terraces that they are put on and found radiocarbon dates from around the island. This is a map of all the radiocarbon dates from Rapa Nui, and they come from underneath, again, these platforms and these megalithic monuments.
This is from Mulrooney's work, Mara Mulrooney, a colleague of mine. This is just radiocarbon dating that we know.
This is
not sites. These are just radiocarbon dates that we have in stratified deposits that have gone through, the majority through radiometric hygiene. So they've gone through the principles of finding the best dates that we have, eliminating water, marine samples, and really trying to focus on short-lived burnt species that the island would have had through grasses and trees and bushes and whatnot. This is just carbon-14.
And so this is must total equal, I mean, because there's probably more than one at each of these points. So
Sure.
this must total equal hundreds of radiocarbon dates from different clear stratified contexts associated with what? Platforms and statues and all this excavation in situ.
And so what that means is these monuments cannot date earlier because of the fact that we have dates from under them. And we have very good coverage across the island, as we see. So we know that the occupation of this island does not date to 12,000 years ago. It dates to only about 1,200 years ago is the first occupation. And again, I have a nice video on Rapa Nui with Dr. Dale Simpson Jr., where we delve into this evidence in detail on this channel. Similarly, Hancock goes to Malta and he shows you these wonderful stone temples. But what he ignores is, again, archaeologists have dug underneath them. And what we have found underneath them is radiocarbon dates, pottery, in fact, Neolithic villages that date after the Ice Age. Neolithic villages exist underneath some of these structures in Malta. And with this excavation that we have done, we know that those structures that he highlights, there cannot be from the Ice Age. There's a Neolithic village underneath them. And so the reality is that archaeology has extraordinary evidence. Look at all the excavated sites on the island of Malta. Where is room for this lost civilization on this island? It's simply unthinkable, because we do have extraordinary evidence, because archaeologists work really hard to produce this evidence that none of you know about. So the reality is in my debate with Graham Hancock, he admitted that among all the evidence archaeologists have explored, there is no evidence for his lost civilization. So what is it that we're looking for if everywhere we've looked, we've found nothing? I want to really make this clear that archaeology itself has a huge data set. There have been millions of sites identified and billions of artifacts that have been studied around the world. And on top of it, if we focus in on Ice Age evidence, for example, the radiocarbon dates from the Paleolithic period in the Ice Age, the Radiocarbon Paleolithic Europe database has a data set of 13,000 different sites. Not just dates, not just artifacts, but sites. So we have very strong coverage. And this is something I really want to emphasize. If we're thinking about this period at the end of the Ice Age, we have great coverage in Europe with the Magdalenian culture, well known for all the famous painted caves, like this one from Lascaux, for example. And also throughout North America, we have very strong coverage. Every dot on this map represents a site from the Clovis culture, which is the group of people that occupied America at the time that Graham Hancock suggests there might have been a lost civilization. So we have, again, tens of thousands of sites throughout these different continents in each of these places that tells us about what was going on at this time period. So what Hancock instead tries to get you to think about is this idea that some people online have taken to call Atlantis of the gaps. He suggests that because we have not found material evidence of this kind of civilization from the Ice Age, that should not be compelling evidence that no such civilization ever existed. After all, as he says, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially so in the case of archaeology, when only limited areas of the Earth's surface have ever been subject to archaeological survey at all. So he suggests, what about the 27 million square kilometers of prime coastal lands that are now underwater? Or what about for example, the Sahara Desert, which was green and fertile for long periods of the Ice Age? It has 9 million square kilometers.
But I'm saying that for archaeology to claim and to quite viciously and unpleasantly attack me for suggesting the possibility that there might be a lost civilization, to make that claim while having failed thus far to investigate thoroughly the vast areas of the submerged continental shelves, the vast areas of the Amazon rainforest, the vast areas of the Sahara Desert that have not been investigated, that claim is premature and that claim is disingenuous.
But we have thousands of sites from these areas.
I don't care how many sites you've got.
Give me a second.
There's 3,000 underwater sites that have been found.
Graham, working with archaeology is working from the known and what we actually have towards the unknown.
And these are the areas that I want to focus on. He claims that we have done minimal surveys, minimal excavations in these areas.
We're looking at less than 5% of the continental shelves that have been studied at all by archaeology. I'm not surprised that we find hunter-gatherer traces underwater. I'm very glad that we do. I would be very surprised if we didn't. But what I'm saying is that not enough of that 27 million square kilometers has been investigated. Only a tiny fraction has been investigated. And that fraction is not enough to draw the conclusion that we can absolutely say there was no lost civilizations.
So let's look at the known. Let's look at what we do have, the coverage we have, the evidence we have, because he's not looking at it. He never presents any of the evidence we do have from the Ice Age in the Sahara Desert or underwater or along Ice Age coasts. So another claim that he has when we think about underwater survey is he claims that marine archaeology is focused on shipwrecks and not on settlements from the submerged continental shelves. But what he's ignoring is that the 300,000, nearly 300,000 shipwrecks that have been documented underwater, they mostly come from the submerged continental shelves. Archaeologists, nautical archaeologists, are surveying the exact area that he claims we are not surveying. And so when we look at this, the reality is that underwater archaeologists have developed very sophisticated suite of methods in order to understand what's going on at the end of the Ice Age. So I have a video at Dr. Jessica Cook-Hale, for example, where she describes how she targets these sites. She looks at the geomorphology and the past climatic and environmental reconstructions to predict where she could look for Ice Age sites.
The Osceola River has some of the densest terminal Pleistocene and early Holocene occupations in the American Southeast, or definitely in Florida. We don't just do random dives. We go back from the known to the unknown. We look at terrestrial patterns. We look at cultural types. So periods where people were using shellfish as a subsistence base. It's really important to look at those sites on land and say, what are the factors? What environmental patterns or cultural patterns can we tease out of these larger distributions? And then we project it offshore. And if we're fortunate, then after we pull all those threads together, this is what we get.
And she does this by comparison of underwater geomorphology with our understanding of above water archaeology. And therefore, she knows where to dive and where to target. And lo and behold, off the coast of Florida, she has found dozens of sites dating from the end of the Ice Age to this younger Dryas period and even the early Holocene. And so by doing sophisticated predictive modeling, archaeologists are able to find these sites underwater, which Graham Hancock does not want you to know about. And so the reality is that we are doing this underwater archaeological survey and excavation all over the globe. Everywhere you look, there are reports of underwater finds from the Ice Age, from after the Ice Age, and from up until today in many ways. And so we have actually much better coverage than what he talks about. We have evidence, for example, of a seawall from 7,000 years ago in modern day Israel trying to combat sea level rise. Or, for example, just a year ago, Gearson et al. Published the earliest evidence of architecture in Europe, this underwater wall that was actually a hunting wall. So it was designed to funnel prey along so that the hunters could hunt their prey. And so we have this kind of evidence from the period that Graham Hancock is interested in. And at the same time, we have phenomenal sites found underwater. For example, Coscar Cave off the coast of Marseille. It was found by divers. It's 115 feet underwater, and it's off the coast of Marseille. It's from that Magdalenian period, 27,000 years ago to 18,000 years ago, and it's dated conclusively by radiocarbon. And inside, we have all these amazing examples of cave art, including some of our only evidence from the Magdalenian culture of sea creatures, including, for example, great auks and different kind of shellfish and things like that that show up in this cave. And so I cannot emphasize enough, we're looking underwater and we're finding stuff, not just shipwrecks, but evidence for Ice Age habitation. And it is not a lost civilization with advanced technology. Similarly, we're not just looking underwater. The reality is that sea level rise is not even everywhere. In some areas, because of where the continental shelf is, the modern coastline is really just a few miles away from the coastline at the end of the Ice Age in the Pleistocene. So, for example, in northern Spain, on the Bay of Biscay, there are dozens of Stone Age sites from the end of the Ice Age, from the late Pleistocene, right near the coast. And so we can target these areas, and we do target these areas that are not underwater that can tell us about coastal interaction. And this is important because what archaeologists are focusing on is how people at the end of the Ice Age interacted with marine environments. We understand, for example, all this fishing, collection of shellfish, hunting of whales and trading these whale bones inland because they're great material for making bone tools. And so dozens and dozens of archaeologists are focused on exploring the marine interactions between hunter-gatherers at the end of the Ice Age. And we find dozens and dozens of sites all over this region that show this kind of engagement with no room left for an advanced civilization in this area. And so this is what this kind of map looks like, for example, of the Iberian Peninsula, of where we have sites, and most of them are near the coastlines and near the Ice Age coastlines, not just the modern coastlines. So we have good coverage. Another reason that we might end up with sites that are above water today from near the coast is because of activities, natural activities that can cause the land to rise in comparison to the sea. So, for example, tectonic uplift, where the plate goes underneath. And so I have been to this site. This photo was taken by my wife, Yonita Martini. This is the site of Plakias, or Dam Noni, on southern Crete, where Professor Tom Strasser, did a targeted survey and then excavation in this area. Why? He was looking for the earliest evidence of people on Crete, and he chose this area because of the uplift, the fact that the African plate was going underneath the European plate, and therefore the south coast of Crete was being pushed up. And what that means was this was the place to go and do survey. And he found this sea cave, which today is well above sea level, but it was a cave formed by wave action when it was at sea level. And so archaeologists are targeting these kind of areas, coastal regions that would be uplifted due to tectonic activity, and they're finding Stone Age activity. And at the same time, what they're finding is some of the earliest evidence for seafaring in the Mediterranean. As I mentioned, when I was in Austin on Joe Rogan talking to Graham Hancock, I talked about this kind of early Stone Age seafaring. Finally, we can head to North America, where, as you can see, these coasts are not distributed evenly. So while there is a broad expanse of underwater coastal areas in the eastern seaboard, though not on eastern Florida. That's why in Miami there's Cutler Ridge, where we have evidence of hunter-gatherers living right near the Ice Age coasts. Or as we discussed, we have Jessica Cook Hale's underwater survey, where she found similar evidence underwater, not too far, by the way, from Bimini Road, which Graham Hancock brings up as a natural feature. So we have coverage in the area, the region of Bimini, that shows hunter-gatherers living there, but no advanced civilization near the coast. But even more importantly, we have the West Coast. The West Coast of North America is extremely fruitful for approaching to understand Ice Age coastlines, because the continental shelf is not too far away. And in Canada, we have another phenomenon where the melting of the glaciers put pressure on the land and weight it down. And as these glaciers melt and weight less, the land rises up, and this is called isostatic rebound. And so archaeologists have targeted these areas of the Pacific Northwest to look for early peoples in the Americas to understand coastal interactions, because the land is rising equal to or faster than the sea is rising, which means we can target these areas. And so archaeologists have been targeting these areas. Dozens and dozens of sites have been identified from survey and from excavation to be able to understand the early peopling of the Americas. And we have ephemeral traces in these kind of beach sands, like these footprints, for example, on the Pacific coast of Canada, published by Duncan McLaren. And these kind of footprints combined with stone tools and animal bones, they show the kind of evidence for early people, these early hunter-gatherers living on the coasts in the Pacific Northwest. And these are firmly dated. I really want to emphasize that again, digging below the footprints, we have radiocarbon dates from above, from below, and embedded into the footprints that give us a clear sense of these dates from right at the same period where Graham Hancock would propose there's an advanced civilization living on the coasts. But it was actually these hunter-gatherers living on the coasts.
But if it's a global catastrophe, how is it so strong everywhere, yet it's not wiping out our evidence from hunter-gatherers at this exact same time? We have ephemeral traces, footprints, campgrounds, fires and hearths.
Right.
We have lithics.
Because human beings did survive, right?
Yeah, but we have it from this exact same period.
Right, but human beings did survive at that same
and
period.
it didn't wipe out the traces of them from that period.
But the traces you're talking about are stone tools and
hearths, footprints, things like that that are extremely ephemeral, animal bones and seeds. We have all of these things from the period around this supposed destruction.
And so these kind of targeted approaches, what they're doing is they're helping us reconceptualize the early peopling of the Americas, which, by the way, I have a video on this channel, a conversation with Dr. Jennifer Raff. And you should check it out for sure, because all these new finds looking for ephemeral traces, these footprints like those shown here from White Sands in New Mexico, what they show is that we can challenge and update our ideas, because that's what archaeologists do when we have new evidence. And so now we understand, because of this earlier evidence for the peopling of the Americas, it was actually these coastal environments that people were using, and they rode in on boats along the Pacific Northwest, targeting these rich coastal environments, this kelp superhighway, as John Erlandson has proposed. And that is the prevailing new idea for the peopling of the Americas. And the reality is that Ice Age coastal archaeology is worldwide. On every single continent, there are scholars that are looking at early Stone Age peoples at the end of the Ice Age and how they engage on these marine sort of environments. Their ability to build boats, their ability to go fishing, and their ability to survive and thrive and spread their cultures around the world. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is desert archaeology. And as I mentioned on Joe Rogan, Graham Hancock brought up, well, what about the Sahara Desert? And I said, well, you know, my dad has worked in the Sahara Desert. By the way, my name is Flint because my dad was a Stone Age archaeologist. He named me after the flints that they used to make stone tools. My brother's name is Chip. This is how I grew up on these kind of archaeological projects. And so the reality is when Graham Hancock and I had our back and forth, he asked me.
My question is related specifically to my subject. Has enough of the Sahara been excavated for archaeology to exclude any possibility that they've missed anything important in the Sahara?
What he's doing is he's asking the wrong question. And this is how he tries to get you to ignore how archaeology actually works. Most desert archaeology is not done through excavation. If you've ever been to a desert, there's a lot of wind-blown erosion. And when the sand blows away in an area, what's left behind is the architectural remnants, the heavy stone tools that people were using. So, for example, the Pakep survey in Saudi Arabia has found in the desert area of Iowa and Khaybar over 120,000 archaeological sites. And what's amazing is you can see this from aerial photographs like these, where they find these tombs that are still visible, even though they were built thousands of years ago, 5300 BC. So we're talking 7,000 years ago. This occupation is plainly visible in the desert. This is how he's finding 120,000 sites. Or, for example, in the Horn of Africa, where a PhD student, Pablo Gutierrez de Leon, has surveyed over 171,000 sites in the Horn of Africa. Again, documenting in this case tombs from about 1,500 years ago that are visible due to the erosion in the desert. And the same thing happens for Stone Age sites from the end of the Ice Age. So, for example, my dad's project outside of Abydos, right where the very first dynasty comes from in Egypt, in the high desert, him and Debelshevsky and Shannon McFerrin, they camped out in camps run by 12-volt batteries. And they targeted areas where they understood the paleoclimatic evidence and the geomorphology, much like Jessica Cockale did for underwater survey. And they targeted these wadis where the Sahara would have been green and fertile during these periods in the Ice Age. And by targeting those areas, they found hundreds of Ice Age sites, lithic scatters, these kind of dense scatters of lithics, where they could find stone tools much like this, or much like this. They could find these just sitting on the surface, these kind of lithic pavements, and they could find where people were napping these tools in the past. And they could even put them back together, a series of blades and flakes that fit back together into the core itself. So here's some photos of some of these refits, these joins that they found. And today, right now, Emily Hallinan is actually exploring the area right outside of Luxor, the Valley of the Kings. And in those areas, she is finding these similar lithic pavements, these pavements of stone tools that exist in the desert for us to see without excavating. So asking how much excavation we've done does not actually get us to look at what we have found. So we've covered underwater, we've covered the deserts, and we've covered the Ice Age. The last thing I think we need to be looking at is, what does Graham Hancock mean when he talks about advanced technology? And he has changed his mind many times on what this means.
I was never referring to the machine technology of the 18th and 19th century. I was referring to evidence I presented suggesting knowledge of longitude during the Ice Age and knowledge of the shape and location of Antarctica during the Ice Age.
This ignores the fact that he has described several times in writing about legends talking about metalworking of these advanced civilization that he describes. And what he ignores is, if they could document longitude, which was only discovered in the 18th century, that requires a chronometer, which is a tool that is made using metals. So, by all of Graham Hancock's statements, from his earlier writings to his most recent statements about being able to calculate longitude, it is clear that this civilization must have had advanced technology, use of metalworking, if it existed in the way that he is claiming. And as I presented on Joe Rogan, the reality is we don't have to look at archaeological evidence. We can look at evidence from environmental proxies. So things like ice cores or cores around the world that are not actually studied archaeologically. They're studied by people who want to reconstruct past climates, past environments, past ecosystems. And in there, we should be able to find evidence of human activity. Because, as I pointed out, there's been several recent studies by Joseph McConnell and Andrew Wilson and others that look at evidence of metallurgy in ice cores. They're finding spikes in lead, which is a byproduct of mining and smelting silver. And they find these spikes in lead showing up during the periods of Roman Empire, during the Renaissance, periods when we know that there's more metallurgy taking place. And lastly, they've done isotopic analyses of these trace elements of lead and traced them to these mines that have been excavated. So I've been criticized about this a lot because I presented this evidence. This is what we're looking for, is my entire point. If we want to find an advanced civilization, sophisticated, that used metallurgy in the Ice Age.
To vouch for the supposed truth of these claims, Flint relies on the slide he displayed as he made them. The graph featured in Flint's slide is taken from this 2018 paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS. Unfortunately for the audience, however, this 2018 PNAS paper doesn't deal with the Ice Age at all.
And the reality is that there are plentiful scholarly studies of ice cores that do go back into the Ice Age. And in all of these cases, they have found trace elements in these ice cores. And in every single one of them, they have determined that those trace elements during the Ice Age come from wind-blown dust. How do they do this? They do this in two different ways. One, the spikes in various trace elements. It's not just lead, which is a byproduct of smelting. It's lead, it's zinc, it's aluminum, it's cadmium. It's a series of different trace elements that spike at the same time because it comes from natural sources, wind-blown dust, which it has a lot of different elements. Similarly, just like with metallurgy, they have done isotopic analysis on these trace elements, and in order to provenance where they came from. And in all of these studies, doing isotope analysis on this kind of trace elements from ice cores, they've determined that they come from wind-blown dust with hard evidence. And Graham Hancock wants you to ignore this evidence. And I say this very clearly. This strikes me as disingenuous, Graham. You should be better. You asked me in June, what were my sources for Ice Age trace elements and studies of Ice Age layers of ice cores? And I gave you citations. And then in your latest video, you ignored those citations and you ignored the conclusions by the experts who study this material. That is disingenuous, where you want your audience to look one way when in fact we have the evidence to disprove you. Just last week, there was one final paper published just a week ago, and this is not ice cores. This is a series of environmental cores taken around the Aegean, around Greece, underwater cores, and cores from on land. And these are environmental cores that were studied again with the intention not of understanding archaeology, but with the intention of understanding past environments. And again, in these cores, there was trace elements of human activity. Again, we have trace elements from activity of metallurgy, and it actually pushes back the evidence for intensive metallurgy in the Aegean back to something, was it 5,000 years ago, I think is what this new study said. I still need to go through it in detail, but the point is these studies are continuing to this day. Just like I plan on presenting in a future evidence on agriculture and food, we have pollen cores that track the evidence for the kind of plants that are growing in the region where these cores are taken. Some from underwater, others are from above water, from lakes and from lagoons and elsewhere, and near coast. And in all these cases, we have no evidence of agriculture from as early as Graham would suggest for his lost civilization. We'll get into that in a future video. But I guess what I really want to end on is we can test the lost civilization hypothesis. Now that we have millions of sites, billions of artifacts, and we have tens of thousands of environmental records from around the globe, we actually have the ability to test this. This is not an unfalsifiable hypothesis. This very much is a falsifiable hypothesis, the Atlantis of the gaps. And the reality is that when we proceed with the evidence that we do have, it is quite clear that we have a lot of evidence from the end of the last ice age. We understand what is happening on every single continent around the world at that time, and we have tens of thousands of well-dated sites. And none of them show any evidence of advanced technology. They show resilient, intelligent hunter-gatherers who have mastered these landscapes. We can see this in the desert, we can see this in the rainforest, and we can see this along the coasts. that existed in the end of the Ice Age. Every single survey and every single excavation that archaeologists conduct tests the idea of a lost civilization from the Ice Age. And every single one of these excavations, every single one of our studies so far disproves it and says that it is beyond plausible. It most likely did not exist. And that is the reality where it stands today, because we do have so much evidence. So Graham, if you want to talk again, if you want to engage in this back and forth, you are still posting on Twitter about me, you are still trying to talk crap about me, let's talk real evidence. This is the real evidence that we have. And I'm sorry, there's no room for a large global civilization. It simply did not exist. Thank you. More from me soon from Archaeology with Flint Dibble. Love and archaeology to everybody. Adieu.